Report from Santa Fe is made possible in part by grants from the members of the National Education Association of New Mexico, an organization of professionals who believe that investing in public education is an investment in our state's economic future, and by a grant from the Healy Foundation, Taos, New Mexico.
Hello, I'm Lorene Mills, and welcome to Report from Santa Fe. I'm delighted to tell you our guest today is Isabel Allende. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me again.
Again. It's a reunion. I was trying to tell my friends really where you stand in world literature. You're like one of the first, the most beloved Latin American writers, and you've gotten so many wonderful awards. You've got a PhD, an honorary doctorate from Harvard. You've gotten a Doctor of Letters from San Francisco State University. But you get things like the Dorothy and Lillian Gish Prize for writers who have contributed to the beauty of the world.
That's a beautiful award.
That was just so wonderful.
It was lovely. Yes.
So welcome back to New Mexico.
Thank you.
And you're on a whirlwind tour because you have this wonderful new book, The Japanese Lover. It is an extraordinary read, and I must tell you, some people, they get a book, it's so good, they just tear through it. I tore through it, and then I didn't want it to end. So I give myself a chapter a night, please don't let it end. So I hope it's a story that you can, at some point, continue with the characters.
You know, several people have asked that, but I don't like that, the sequels. Every book is a new challenge. It has its own way of being told. I can't keep on doing the same thing.
No, you can't. You've had so many.
I've tried everything.
You have. You did Eveluna, the short stories. That was your only book of short stories.
Yeah, I've done memoirs, historical novels, literary fiction, young adult. I've even written a cookbook. Well,
Aphrodisia, not an ordinary cookbook. And you did that after Paula. You have kind of two chapters of your memoirs. This book, Paula, about your daughter, a very tragic book, but it has helped so many people.
You know, of all my books, and I've written several, that's the one that gets the most heartfelt response from readers. I get messages every week. The book was published more than 20 years ago, and I still get messages from people who are either reading it and they feel touched, or they read it long ago and something happens in their lives and they remember it. So it's very touching.
But it was, I imagine, the hardest book you ever had to write.
No, actually it was very healing. I wrote like with tears because it was all about my daughter, but it was also about family and the good things that had happened in the 28 years of her life. So writing it sort of was cathartic in a way.
And she had a disease where she didn't, through the most strange chance.
It's a very rare condition that should not be fatal. And it was mismanaged in the hospital in Madrid, neglected in intensive care, and she got severe brain damage that has nothing to do with the condition that she had. And they tried to hide it in the hospital for almost 5 months before I got back my daughter in a vegetative state.
But then you told her stories. You spent I don't know how long telling her all these stories because you knew there was...
I thought she was going to wake up. So I wanted her to remember what her life had been about and who her family was, from where she came originally. And so that's how I started taking notes in the hospital of the things I would tell her when she would wake up. But of course she never woke up.
And I'm sorry, but so many people have gained from your honesty and your heart in that. And then the second part of your memoir is called The Sum of Our Days, and that's another wonderful read, just extraordinary read.
You know, that was written, I don't know, several years ago, and people say, when are you going to write another memoir? But the problem is that in any memoir, other people appear, my family, my son, my friends, and nobody wants me to write a memoir because they feel betrayed. And I have promised them that I will not.
Well, some people write their memoirs that are published upon their death. So Corvidal did that.
Well, I will be dead, but what about them?
Yes,
maybe
that's
not.
true. That's true. Well, it all started with this book, and this is such an old, wonderful one, but it's The House of the Spirits. And what provoked you? Because we need to talk about letter writing.
It all began with a letter that I started for my grandfather. I was living as a political refugee in Venezuela after the military coup in Chile, when I had to leave my country. And my grandfather, in 1981, was dying in Chile, and I could not go back to say goodbye. So I started a letter that was going to be a sort of spiritual letter, because I was almost sure that he was never going to read it. And he died, and I continued writing, and it became the House of the Spirits. The letter evolved into something that had no shape for me. I wasn't planning a novel. It didn't feel like a novel, because all the characters of the members of my family were there, the history of my country. To me, it felt non-fiction almost, like a memoir, but obviously it is fiction.
Well, and it made a movie, and you have told that our new age people out here who don't want to read book but want to see a movie, you have given them permission to just watch the movie of the House of the Spirits, because it stars.
Yeah, it's different from the book, but it's a very good movie with a wonderful cast.
Wonderful cast.
It has Meryl Streep, Jeremy Irons, Vanessa Redgrave, Glenn Close, Antonia Winona Ryder. Everybody's in the movie.
Yeah, it's beautifully done. It's beautifully done. Now, letter writing is such a theme for you that this book, House of the Spirits, started with a letter to your grandfather. And then you and your mom write letters.
Every day.
Every day.
Well, now we email each other, and I print her emails, and mine too, and they go in a box. And I have a closet with all the boxes per year, and now we are trying to archive, especially the old boxes, because some of the paper is deteriorating.
Because, how old is she now?
95. She still writes every day.
And you have been writing for how many years?
Oh, I don't know, decades.
Decades.
And so there are, I don't know how many boxes in there, but many, many. And sometimes a box can have 600 pages, 800 pages. It's impressive.
So are you digitizing them?
Yes, we're doing that now.
Yeah, and you use letters again in The Japanese Lover. They have these beautiful letters back and forth to each other, some with drawings. And it's like when... It's fair, this without giving anything away, that The Japanese Lover, during the time of World War II, was sent to a Japanese internment camp. So a lot of those letters are censored. And
they were letters written by a kid to another kid, and they were censored. So the kid ends up sending drawings instead, because the drawings were not censored.
Yes. Can we talk a little bit about the Olympics?
Oh,
in 2006. You were honored to be one of the bearers of the Olympic torch or flag.
Flag.
And you were in great company.
I was with Sophia Loren in front of me and Susan Sarandon behind me. And I was in the middle of these two beauties, wonderful, lovely women. Sophia Loren is really tall, and she was the only one who had boots with heels, plus the hair. So she was like a tower. And Susan Sarandon is not short. She's a tall woman also. So you can see the flag, Sophia Loren, Susan Sarandon, and my feet under the flag. Under the flag. You never see me, but it's fine. It was a very wonderful moment.
But it was a great honor, and there were other women too, a Nobel Prize.
Yeah, and Wangari Maathai, who planted millions of trees in Africa.
30 million trees, changed her
Somali
climate.
Imam, who had started all that movement to liberate girls from prostitution, and there were 3 Olympic champions there.
We are in a troubled time. You, after your daughter died, you set up a foundation to help empower women and girls. And I remember you told me this story. You were in India because you were writing the book, the Aphrodisia, the cookbook, that you said was lucky that it came out before Viagra did. And that when you were in India, some women to whom you'd given some bangles to just help them.
No, it wasn't to help them. We were traveling with a friend, and the engine of the car was too hot, so we stopped. The driver stopped the car to cool the engine, and my friend Tabra and I. By the way, you are wearing Tabra's earrings.
And they were present from you. Thank you so much.
So we had bought some bangles in a market, and we saw some women with kids, like 6 or 5 women. And we went to them to talk with them. Of course, there was no common language, so just touching and sort of signaling. And we gave them the bangles. And when we were leaving, going to the car, one of the women came and she gave me a little parcel of rags. And I thought she was trying to give me something back for the bangles. And I said, no, don't worry, it's fine. And I tried to give it back, and she insisted and pushed this thing on me. And I opened the rags, and inside was a newborn baby. I mean, it must have been born hours before, because it had the umbilical cord, and it was just a tiny, tiny baby. And so I tried to give it back, and she wouldn't have it. And the driver took the baby from me and gave it to the mother, pushed me in the car, and we drove away. And when I sort of recovered from the shock, I said, why would she give me her baby? And the driver said, it's a girl. Who wants a girl? And that was the beginning of the idea of the foundation. I could not help that girl, but maybe I could help other girls. And so that's how it got started.
And what I learned from reading Paula, that one of her kind of mottos, or a touchstone phrase for her, when confronted with
any circumstances,
she would ask herself, and now I ask myself, what is the most generous thing I can do in this situation?
And that can apply for everything, you know, even if it's not about material stuff or money. What's the most generous thing that you can do for a friend? Or you can do for someone that is asking for advice, someone that needs your time. And it always works, always.
Well, we're in a world situation now. I remember I've watched some of your TED Talks, they're wonderful, about the worldwide refugee situation. It wasn't even as bad when you were speaking about it then, that 80% in many cases of the refugees are women and children.
Yes. Yes.
And I recently interviewed Janet Napolitano, who was the former Department of Homeland Security Secretary, and I asked her when we had all the Latin American unaccompanied children coming here, and she just said, immigration is a political problem and it should never be solved on the backs of women and children.
Yeah.
So what do you think about what's happening now with the worldwide refugee crisis?
Well, now we talk about the worldwide refugee crisis because it's happening in Europe. But these masses of refugees have happened in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America. No one was paying attention. Only when they knocked the door in Europe, then we talk about a crisis. Europe can absorb the refugees, and so can the United States. The percentage of refugees, if you take into account the number, the population, it's nothing. It's 1% or less in Europe. They can be absorbed and they can be helped. And the refugees who come are young and they bring their children. The old people are left behind. They come to work, they come to have a new life. They are looking for safety. I have to put myself in their place because I have been also a political refugee. Of course, in my circumstances, nothing as tragic as being in a boat with my children.
Or being attacked by ISIL.
Oh, absolutely not. But the only reason why you leave what is familiar to you, your home, your family, your language, is because you're desperate, because you feel so threatened and so unsafe that you prefer the risk of the trip and reach a place where you're not welcome.
Now, you actually fled Chile because of the coup, and your cousin was Salvador Allende, and you lived abroad. But when you were a journalist in Chile, you do tell the wonderful story about meeting with Pablo Neruda, the most beloved poet of Chile.
Yeah, but he was the Nobel Prize, and he was already old and living in a beach house. And he invited me to his house, and I thought he wanted me to interview him. Mm-hmm. And I thought that I was the best journalist in the country if he wanted me to go. So I went to visit him. It was 2 hours in the car. It was raining, winter. And we had a lovely lunch with a bottle of white wine. And then I said, Don Paulo, it's getting late, and I have to go back, so why don't we do the interview? And he said, what interview? I would never be interviewed by you. You're the worst journalist in this country. You lie all the time. You cannot be objective. And I'm sure that if you don't have a story, you make it up.
But didn't he tell you that you should be doing fiction?
He said,
forget this reporting.
He said, why don't you turn to literature where all these defects are virtues?
Well, he was right. Thank you.
I didn't pay any attention at the time. It took me many years to become a writer.
Well, we're very grateful that you did. You have 56 million books in print? It's huge.
The last number was 3 years ago, and it was 65 million.
65 million books.
I hope that in these 3 years I have sold a little more.
I think so.
But who is counting? I don't know how they count that.
I don't either. I don't either. But 30 languages at least.
35 languages.
Yeah, and that's wonderful because, and this book I know will do very well, The Japanese Lover.
We just came back, my daughter-in-law and I, from a tour in Europe. And the book is doing really well in Europe in several languages. So I'm pleased. Now we'll see her in the States.
Well, we're speaking today with the wonderful writer Isabel Allende, and her early book, the one that started it, is House of the Spirits. Her new book is called The Japanese Lover, and she's here on a book tour for that. All of your characters, you write about passionate characters. This is not, these are not humdrum people, although everyone looks the same from the outside, but once you get into their heart, which you reveal so beautifully to us, they're passionate people doing extraordinary things. You did a TED Talk about how to live passionately no matter at what age. So give us your advice. You are clearly doing that yourself.
When I was writing the book, I talked with many people, old people, starting age 65 and up. My mother is 95. My stepfather is 100. So I have talked to people of all ages. And you can live with a passionate heart. First of all, you need to be more or less healthy and to have minimum resources, because if you live in poverty, it's all about survival. But if the basic stuff is covered, and you need a community, you need purpose, a sense of being useful in some aspect of life, being engaged, curious, and if possible, to be in love or to have love of some kind. And people say, well, how can you be in love at 80? Of course you can be in love at 80 like a teenager. And I have several examples of that, including my neighbor who is 87, and she has a lover who is 14 years younger that shows up on Thursdays and leaves on Sundays. Very nice.
You dedicated the new book to your parents.
My parents.
And are they living passionately at their advanced age?
To the extent that they can, yes.
Yes, yes. One of the settings, I don't want to give away too much about this book because it unfolds like a flower. It's just wonderful how it unfolds. But one of the locales is a
nursing home. A retirement home.
A retirement home, but in San Francisco. This is not going to be an ordinary...
But actually it exists. I didn't make it up. In real life it's called the Redwoods, and it's in Mill Valley. And it's exactly as I portrayed in the book.
I want to go.
I didn't have to make that up, just research.
But, people are allowed their eccentricities. People are allowed to be painters still, they're allowed to write.
Not allowed, they just take it for granted that it's their lives. So that in getting older, there are stages. We have those stages when we are younger. We are children, teenagers, young people, mature people. There are stages. Why do we put all the older people in one bag when the truth is that as you age, there are also stages? It's very different to retire at 65 than the person you will be at 75 or at 85 or 95. These stages depend absolutely on your health and if you can live independently or not. If you need a lot of help, you are more dependent, and therefore your life is much more limited than the life of a 65-year-old person or 70. I am 73, and I feel that I am in a completely different stage in life than my mother, who is 95.
Yes.
But in the eyes of my grandchildren, I'm just as old as a great-grandmother.
I know, but you said that when you carried the Olympic flag, you became the cool.
Yeah, I was cool for a while.
Oh no, you're still cool. So you're on a book tour, and you have had a structure for your writing. First, you set out a superstition, and then as a very wise work habit, that on January 8th...
I start all my books.
Yeah.
On January 8th, and that's a day, that date gives me structure for the year, because I have to set aside a few months of silence and solitude to be able to write. Having a day to start allows me to do it without procrastination.
And where do these ideas come from?
In this, well, all the ideas, people give me their stories, but they have to be connected to me somehow. And this started with a friend that told me that her mother, who was 80 in a retirement home, had a friend for 40 years that was a Japanese gardener. That was all she said. But somehow, well, I started imagining that maybe they were not only friends, maybe they were lovers. And I started thinking, is love possible at 80? Passion? Can love endure a lifetime? How is to be old in a retirement home? What happens with memory, with the past? All those questions were in my life, because at that moment my marriage of 27 years was ending. So the theme of love was very present in my life, because I was losing it. Very present in my life at that point, and that's why I connected with the story.
Another element from the first book all the way through, the way that you weave the supernatural. Now they say she's a practitioner of Gabriel Garcia Marquez's magical realism. No, your supernatural is so natural that, and there's supernatural in all of these books. And
but what is supernatural? It's just those mysterious things that manifest in life all the time, and we can't explain. There is a difference between magic realism and fantasy. Fantasy is not connected to anything that you know or you have experienced. Magic realism is coincidences, dreams, things that happen that you cannot explain. You were telling me that you were thinking of your husband wanting a sign, and suddenly, what happened?
A great big metal key from 1860, part of a grandfather clock, came tumbling down. It never had been there for like 10 years without being touched, and I just, after reading your book, thought, I wonder if I'm missing some messages, and wham! You know, well, maybe I...
Of course it's a coincidence, but if you want to read it as a sign, it adds richness to your life, and of course to literature.
Well, and also, I was actually wondering if I was missing some signs, if I'd been so, in the workaday, everyday life that I was missing this.
We have this game with my daughter-in-law that we ask each other for a person. For example, I say, have you heard from so-and-so? And I can bet you anything that day we will get an email or a phone call. It is as if mentally we are calling the person. Is that possible? Maybe. We don't know.
So, in part of living passionately and being open on so many levels, I'd love some advice for our audience, some of whom are your fans, some of whom, after they read this next book and any of your books, will become fans. But you really walk your talk. And so, can you help us?
How to age?
How to age, how to be passionate, how to be creative.
You know, I think that we cannot suddenly become passionate or become creative. Like everything else in life, we train for that. And I think we have to train for old age. People think that because they become old, naturally you will be wiser. That's not true. You will be more of what you are. If you're a jerk, you will be more of a jerk. Of course, not less or wiser. Why would you? Age won't give you anything that you don't already have. So I think that if we prepare for old age, we have to take into consideration that one of the worst things of aging is loneliness, because people around us start dying. Our children have their own lives. Our grandchildren don't even remember us, not to mention our great-grandchildren. So we have to create a community, have a group of people that are our buddies, so that we feel that we belong. And I think of a sense of purpose, as I said before. Do something for somebody, for nature, for some cause. Get involved. Don't go inside into the loneliness of aging. You can be passionate. Now, if you can be in love or find love, that's great. And I am at that stage in life when I'm looking for love. I'm totally open to it.
Well, when you talk about finding a community, one of the avenues of community is through communication. And when I see what letters have done in your life, started House of the Spirits, your letters with your mom, your letters in this book, what have we lost by going to email and never ever handwriting a letter or a card to each other?
We have lost the letter writing, but we have acquired instant communication and constant communication that could be wonderful. Of course, it can be very frivolous and superficial, and some people live in a virtual world of Facebook friends, but they don't have anybody to hold their hand when they need them. I think I'm using text messaging and Facebook and all that, but in a very intimate way. And keeping in touch is really great. And it's a very easy way of being constantly in touch. I'm not against any of the technology.
And Skype in particular.
I Skype with my mother. My mother uses all the technology
really?
too. Yes.
Well, who taught her?
She learned somehow. I don't know who taught her.
Yeah, yes. Well, I'm afraid we've run to the end of our time.
Thank you so much.
Our guest today is Isabel Allende. First book, House of the Spirits, wonderful read. And this one, The Japanese Lover, your new book. Are you writing another one? You're giving yourself some time off from this tour.
January 8th, I need to get started with something. So if you have any idea, please.
Well, we'll talk.
Yeah.
We'll talk. Anyway, I'm honored to have you,
It's
Isabel
my pleasure,
Allende, as my
absolutely.
guest. I hope next time you come to New Mexico, you'll come back.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm Lorene Mills. I'd like to thank you, our audience, for being with us today on Report from Santa Fe. We'll see you next week.
Past archival programs of Report from Santa Fe are available at the website reportfromsantafe.com. If you have questions or comments, please email info@reportfromsantafe.com. Report from Santa Fe is made possible in part by grants from the members of the National Education Association of New Mexico, an organization of professionals who believe that investing in public education is an investment in our state's economic future, and by a grant from the Healy Foundation, Taos, New Mexico.